Chapter 1 of Arendt's work is brief, a single section, but she doubles down on her comments from the prefaces. History can tell us what happened, and that we must be brave enough to look it in the face, whether or not it fits our preconceptions, prejudices, or simplifications which have worked to assuage us, to make us feel better. Here, she takes on some of the simplifications that people have of the oppression of Jewish people through history. Each of these is a kind of shrug, it's always been this way kind of rationalization, which hides what's more complicated. In the next 3 chapters, she will dig into that history more extensively across 200 years or so of European history. But here's the groundwork. The prejudices we may have, which also may blind us a bit to reality. One is that the Jews have always been oppressed, a kind of eternal anti-Semitism, which has been adopted by historians and Jews alike. In using it, oppressors and oppressed alike see nothing unusual or noteworthy about the 20th century's atrocities except that they are an extreme moment, a culmination of what has always been. For Arendt, this escapism of responsibility for anti-Semitic crime is understandable, but false, just as Jews, quote, even more understandably do not wish under any circumstances to discuss their share of responsibility, unquote. She will spell this responsibility out in the next chapters. The other myth she takes on directly is the belief that the Jews were random or innocent scapegoats for oppression. There was little random about the choices made for the Holocaust and other acts of anti-Semitism, and Arendt argues that painting the Jewish people as lost innocents also erases their partial responsibility for what occurred. More, it works to erase any clues to a motivated why for the horror, making it all the more difficult to see the signals were it to occur again. For me, this is the basis for my reading and talking about it. If we choose any marginalized people and shrug off deeper examinations of their persecution with any simplification, they are naive innocents, which is quite a bit of an insult. They are part of a global conspiracy. That's an insult too, and a subscription to propaganda. History has always been against them, therefore nothing remarkable or more about it needs to be said about it. If we use any of these to shrug off that historical analysis, we risk not only repeating the behavior, but becoming a victim to the strategic and totalitarian propaganda which fuels it. Arendt goes further still, arguing that, quote, history itself is destroyed and its comprehensibility is in danger. When the facts of history are set aside, anything's possible, and any horror can be committed with our, if not blessing exactly, our tacit acquiescence. I guess I've been stunned just how short our acknowledgement, our memory of history really is. Part of it, I know, is the vast array of stories we're assailed with, each about 3 days or even 30 minutes long, soon to be replaced by the next dozen. And somehow, we forget words that were spoken not a month earlier, lessons we believed we had learned just a few short years before. We cannot engage, cannot argue with those who ignore history. History which is 30 years old, 3 years, or 3 days. We cannot engage with, cannot argue with those who deny the facts of this history. Today, even the written and video evidence is not sufficient. And yet, we keep trying to argue with them, to reason and make comprehensible that which is an ever-shifting fantasy target. The goal of tyranny is neither reason nor comprehensibility. We talked about Arendt's argument about the irrational last time with the prefaces. The goal of tyranny is power, and power is derived by turning the people against each other in anger and in fear. For me, nearly every 3-day story which arrives in our feeds reveals this pattern. But there is hope, too, in looking at this history. The thread Arendt raises again and again, which so often explains resentment and the fragility of any people's, any class, is, she says, wealth without visible function. Resentment of a people resentment of a class is never caused merely by oppression or exploitation. In other words, the wealthy and powerful can oppress and exploit as they choose, so long as those leaders appear to have a function or use. That wealth and power becomes, quote, much more intolerable when nobody can understand why it should be tolerated. And this was a primary reason for the fall of the European aristocracy, and it may well have been a primary reason for the selection of the Jews for oppression. Who else today has wealth without apparent function? How much more wealth will be taken before we find the momentum to say, enough? The next chapter will dig into this history back to the early 1800s to see how Europe changed and the Jewish question with it.